Welcome everybody to episode 5
Number
of How to
5.
Keep the Fights Clean and the Sex Dirty. We're here with Joel Mark Witt and Antonia Doge to talk about how we work on getting unhooked when we're in a tailspin in the midst of a fight, right, Moni?
Yeah, how to tame those triggers, and unhook, you're totally upset and grabbed by something, and in the heat of it, how do you unhook and really start to be helpful and get ready to move towards something rather than just pushing away from what you're not enjoying. So we'll get into that in a minute, but first let's back up and introduce our guests. You want me to introduce them? Okay,
yes.
So Joel and Antonia, you guys are in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh?
Near.
Yes.
Yeah, near Pittsburgh, yeah.
Here in that area. And I met Antonia about 5 or 6 years ago when she was speaking at Evan Pagan's seminar as a personality expert. And in the last few years, I think maybe 3 years, 4 years now, the two of you have not just become, 5 years you've been a couple, but now you actually work together in that same business as well. And really appreciate you guys being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're glad to be here.
Absolutely.
Great.
I was just seeing if there's anything I left out in their bio.
Yeah. Anything?
Sounded good.
Sounded good, yeah.
Anything that you want to just inform our audience about the work that you do, and then we're going to dive into some content and do some awesome conversation together.
Yeah, sure. Well, we love personality type theory, and so a lot of our content is around type theory, but it's not for its own sake. Our real passion is actually personal development. Mm-hmm. So everything we teach, all the maps and models we use, all the type systems, anything that really, all the content that we teach is primarily for personal development work. And so we hold very loosely to all of our models and maps. If somebody is not into type theory, then we say, well, then don't use it, because really it's about becoming the best version of yourself for all contexts.
Awesome.
Our big passion is about happiness, really. We want people to have an optimized life, to be as happy as possible. And so we like the maps and models we use because we think that they're great tools to reach that goal. But fundamentally, that's really our passion, is personal development.
Yeah, if you go to our offerings page on the Relationship Fun and Games website, the banner says your approach, our offerings, because we have our content, but it's going to resonate for different people in different ways. Some people want more research, some people want more like fun silliness,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just different ways to get the same information. But it is great to have some science behind some of these ideas. I'm a big fan of the science of happiness, and really looking at what does the research show. There's all sorts of great ideas and fun things we can do, but I'm pretty practical. I want to know what's the science behind happiness. So love sharing that passion with you.
Yeah, and these two have made a massive difference in our lives. We've been profiled, or whatever you want to call it, in their system profile. And they have this awesome system to help you understand yourself better when you're regressing into behaviors that aren't really serving you, but also use them to grow the parts of you that are actually really robust, but have them serve you instead of actually detract from you. And one little tip that I got from them that's just made a massive difference and also makes me very happy is that they give you these resets that help you move from kind of your lower self into your higher self. And one of them was that
if you're stressed or triggered, just like we're talking about here, what to do when you're triggered.
And basically to take a shower. That for me, something involving warm water.
Closed loop. It needs to be closed loop, beginning, middle, and end, so he has a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. So,
physical, sensory, and water-based, which I will point out doing the dishes counts as well.
That was not so
That's true.
But taking a shower, it's like stepping into my Superman. I don't know if you've ever seen Superman when he steps into the phone booth. I have a shower that's actually kind of like phone booth size. I go in there, I'm in and out of there in like 2 minutes, and I'm like, ta-da. So, and Gabby doesn't give me a hard time for taking 5 showers a day.
So basically, we justify bad behavior for you. I love doing that for people.
Or at least make the behavior really worth it. If I know that bit of water is going to give my husband a mental health reset, I'm like, okay, go for it. And they're short. He literally takes a 60-second shower.
People are like, you're done?
Yeah. I'm obviously being facetious.
Yeah.
It's not bad behavior at all. Yeah, no, it's a great reset. And I'm actually glad that it's continuing to serve you. That's awesome.
In like 4 years years now. So
Yeah.
And, you know, you're entrepreneurs and run a business together, and Raj and I are entrepreneurs. We run a business together, and your experience of work, whether you're running your own business or you have a job, is really important. You spend more time, often, many of us, working than we do doing anything else. And so I also love how you've applied the work to hiring. In our case, you know, we've used it as consultants and used the system to interview our clients and find out, like, what motivates them and what makes them tick. And have applied that also just now in hiring, the things we've learned from you guys about personalities of, you know, what we're really looking for, so that, you know, things jive and work, and we're not fighting uphill when you're trying to run a business or, you know, have people around you all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm always cautious to use it as like the only criteria for hiring. That said, it's a lot of information about a person's needs, and it gives like a nice little sort of instrument for determining whether or not somebody's going to want to be in a certain position, or once they get there, you know, what are some of the things that they're going to need from the employer in order to. I think the way we really kind of described it for the hiring purposes is like personality ergonomics. Like, you create a physically ergonomic environment for your company in order to optimize your physical energy. And if you can do that with your personality, then you can optimize your psychological and emotional energy as well. So it's more about ergonomics than it is about like making definitive, like, oh yeah, this person will never work out because they're this type. It's more like, okay, so we've got this type in this position. How do we make sure that you know, everything about that is a win-win?
Great. Well, let's step back a moment here now, and we'll talk about a little bit about the topic for today. You know, this is one of the weeks that we're doing Fights Clean, and we're at the level of looking at during. Raj, you want to show that graphic there?
Yeah, so for some of you who are new to our content format, we talk about Fights Clean and Sex Dirty, and we have these little logo icons that signify both. The one on the left, the heart with the halo on it, is Fights Clean.
Be nice when you're fighting. Be nasty. Get the devil horns out. Save that for your sex life.
The heart on the right is the devil heart, Sex Dirty. Get your save. What do you like to say?
Save being nasty for your sex life.
Yeah.
Good model.
In each of our shows, we actually navigate the circle before, as it starts, during, and after. And today we're talking about during Fights Clean. And this is a particularly potent conversation because, as we all have probably experienced, when you get into the heat of an argument, it tends to spiral downward and get worse. And so these tips and tricks can help save you like an entire weekend, a week. Like, often, like, we're out for a great dinner and like we get into an argument about something and we ruin the whole freaking night and we planned it the whole week. So these tips can like expedite the process of going from a total tailspin to like pulling out of it, you know, pull up. So that's our conversation topic today. So, and just to give you a sense of how the rest of the show is going to go, we're going to introduce some of our topics in this arena, in this Fights Clean during phase. In that conversation, we're going to engage back and forth with Joel and Antonia. And at about the 30-minute mark, you're going to be able to click on the Join the Hangout button on the live episode page.
Get in on the action.
And get in on the action.
Start getting your questions asked.
If you have questions, you can post them in the comment window. You can also comment on the web page down below the video feed. And you can even show up live on screen if you'd like. So lots of fun to come. So shall we dive in, honey?
Yes.
Great.
So today's episode is called Taming the Triggers and Unhook even in the heat of it. You know, so I like to use a lot of alliterations. We like to make it fun and memorable. And again, there's the science. You know, you're more likely to remember this tip in an alliteration. The other one I was talking to Raj about this morning was shifting out of an argument and into alignment. So that you're not like at odds with each other, but you're actually in concert working towards something. You may have heard the expression that I've said before, and recently a friend shortened it, so I'll give you my version and then her shortened version. My version is, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is you think the problem's a problem. The problem is actually the path. And so she phrased that as, your mess is your message. Or sometimes you might hear someone say that the breakdown is actually the breakthrough. So that's the context that we're bringing to these upsets, that, you know, it doesn't, when you find yourself at odds, if you get that context, or if you create that context is here's an opportunity for us to become more fuller human beings, look at what's going on. You know I am a much better human being for the work that Raj and I have done in our relationship, and in turn the difference that we can make.
Yeah, we often think that when we get into a fight there's something wrong. Like, if you spent that much time with any one person, you're bound to get into an argument with them. And, you know, what Gabby said, that the mess, what was it? The mess? The
mess is your message. Yeah, that was from Sasha Lala.
Then...
Breakdown Bride, or Breakthrough Bride.
Breakthrough Bride.
The breakthrough after the breakdown.
Yeah. If you look at an argument as an opportunity instead of like, oh my God, here we go again, it really shifts the context, and it can let you be proactive around having an awesome relationship instead of being like, oh my God, you know.
What's this argument trying to say?
Yeah.
We'll even name our arguments, but that's more of the after, and today we're going to be talking a bit more about the during. We have a couple of distinctions that we want to share, and we'll do one and then get into some Q&A and see how the other two might filter in. One of them is a really great in-depth communication one that we're going to spend a whole episode talking about that one, but we'll sprinkle in some top-level tips on that. That's called the Imago dialogue, and really, really great communication tool for unhooking. But we want to start with the oldest. It is our first distinction we ever created, well before we even knew we were ever going to be doing relationship work. We just created it because we needed it. And it's called Stop, Shift, Start. Are you looking for something?
The napkin right here.
We wrote this on a napkin the other day. Hold that up. Stop, Shift, Start.
And this is where it all started, actually, on a napkin. You want to tell the story?
So we were traveling to one of our favorite cities, Seattle, where I have family. And, you know, it's been a long day, and, you know, we're finally going to go out to dinner at one of our favorite restaurants there, Wild Ginger. And we get there, and, you know, hungry is usually one of the things that set us off. I don't know, Antonia and Joel, if that ever happens for you, but hunger, are you ever hangry? You know?
Yeah, and it's getting worse as we get older. Like, I think when we were young, we didn't have to eat, and so we almost forget that we need to do that. And then we'll be just, like, irate for no reason. And I'll be like, have we eaten today? Like, at all? And, yeah.
I wonder why I'm going to tear your head off, because I'm so hungry I want to eat it.
Yeah.
So there we were in this restaurant, and our table wasn't ready, so we're in the bar, so we're hungry. And, of course, I don't even remember what we were fighting about, but it was really because we were hungry. And Raj, sometimes when I get upset, he has this uncanny way of just kind of calming down for a minute, and it's really disarming. You know, when you're upset and somebody's just not like patronizingly, you know, passive and peaceful, like, I'm so much calmer than you, but just genuinely like holding a loving space, like, wow, you're really having a tough time right now. And he said, you know, can we try this a different way, because I know that how we're treating each other right now is not what we've created for ourselves. We're very intentional about our relationship. You know, we have 12 wedding vows, and we say the wedding vow of the month most every day to each other. So we have a pretty clear vision of who we say we want to be. It's not this just default relationship. So he basically said, that's not who we're being. Can we stop and make a shift and start again?
And also, I just wanted to have a great dinner. Like, we're not going to waste the night in this argument.
You know, you're planning this dinner, and then you get there, and it's like 5 minutes, it goes out the window. You know, who knows, maybe you're even fighting on the drive over, and it's about the driving, you know. That one, you got to pull out the hot and bothered backseat driver. If you don't know about that tip, go check that one out on the website. It's an awesome one as well. So there we were in Stop, Shift, Start. He wrote it on the napkin. He wrote the 3 S's and S cubed. And we've used it ever since, and it's kind of shorthand for, you know, we'll even get cheeky, and we have a Fights Clean Sex Dirty toolkit, and it's literally a toolkit. It's this fuchsia and black toolkit. We should bring it to the next episode. Anyways, it has a flag in it, like a soccer referee flag, a yellow flag.
Or, you know, the referees in football games, they like throw the flags on the play.
Throw the flag on the play. And we'll call, you know, I call Stop, Shift, Start, you know, and even pretend to blow a whistle. I call Stop, Shift, Start. And it's shorthand for, you know, we've created what we're committed to, and we're not being that. Let's meet each other in that reality, and, you know, I know it's hard, but just take a step towards me that way. Will you? And it's a big deal. I mean, certainly I have said F, Stop, Shift, Start a couple of times, but it's a big deal to do that. And if your partner offers you an olive branch, take it, no matter how small that olive branch may be. So Raj, before we ask them, and I had something I was going to say about the olive branch. Anything else you want to say about Stop Shift Start?
Yeah, it's a really, and I just want to say welcome to everybody that's joining the show today. So feel free to comment and ask questions. Stop, shift, start is just like a very mechanical thing. When we're hooked into an argument, the first thing that is necessary is that you stop.
First, do no harm, as they say in the medical profession, right?
So you can think of a gear shift and a brake, put it in neutral, stop. And that's the hardest part, actually, because like you want to go back and forth and like one up the next, like, oh yeah. And if you can just get yourself to stop for a second, then you can actually shift the direction of the of where you're headed, right? And that's why the shift is the next part. You mean
like that car speeding, careening towards the cement wall, and you're just driving toward wind blowing back in your hair. You know it's coming, but you just can't stop yourself.
Yeah, so stop takes something. It's like that's actually the ninja move is to stop, and it's actually quite empowering. If either one of you does it, it's like, and sometimes it's just purely out of like you don't want to waste the rest of your day, weekend, whatever.
We've been fighting this before. I said we don't have time to fight.
It's true. Life is short.
Yeah, totally.
Clock is ticking.
Yeah.
I love that you guys have props.
We had a flight we were going to. I'm like, we have a flight to catch. We don't have time to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the stop part, and then the shift part is like, all right, so what do we really want? Consciously creating what you want, because when you get into that argument, it's a lot of old brain triggers, and maybe Antonia and Joel, you can speak to that some. You guys study this a ton. You're just hooked, and so you move from unconscious to conscious, and you're like, who do we want to be? What do we want to create here? How do we want the rest of our day, evening, whatever, to go? And you just like articulate that, right?
Because how you live your days is how you live your life. So if you're fighting about those little things, it's usually not the big things that break up a relationship. It's the slow decline until someone wakes up one day and says, whoa, it's like there's nothing there, and then it's over.
And then the third part is start again. So you kind of like, you stop, and you got yourself sorted out, then you create who you want to be, and then you move forward taking actions from who it is that you said that you wanted to shift into, and then you like, go from there.
And you can reference back episode 1 where we talked about context, and so the context is what you're stepping into. It's best to have created it in advance, and I think the last episode, episode 3, we talked about the shared relationship vision, which Raj and I have condensed into 3 or 4 sentences, and we say it every day. So we know when we say it just before a meal, we're like, where is there the gap where we're saying that? We're like, yeah, that's not true. So you want to have something that when you start, you actually have an intention of what you're starting towards. But at minimum, let's just aim for a playful, peaceful, passionate relationship. So you can call Stop, Shift, Start, and lean in towards playful, peaceful, passionate.
So, just wanted to check in with you two in terms of the work that you've done in terms of profiling and, this personality hacker. Do you guys see something with this distinction, stop, shift, start, that somehow pulls in what you've studied about human behavior and certain personality
types? And happiness,
types?
just with your focus on happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you're saying it, by the way, I'm taking notes because this is good stuff. And as you're talking, I'm thinking that for the two of you, as your personality types, because we know this is like probably the perfect thing for you guys to be doing. And, like basically what you're doing is you're creating a structure, which is what you guys naturally think. You think in terms of structures, external structures in your life, right? So you've created tools and structures and a toolbox and like systems and frameworks.
Right?
So anytime it comes, you're like, okay, I feel out of control. Let's rely on a structure we already have in place. And that probably works really well for you guys. I think for us, because of our personality types, that would almost be that specific, like the rigidity of the structure might be, it might throw a little monkey wrench in. Now we still do rely on. We are, yeah.
You're both receivers, yeah. Okay, great.
Well, and what I like about this too is like I was saying earlier, I was like, you guys have props, like actual physical, tangible props.
I never thought about this.
Is really fascinating to me, and I think it
monster hats that if we're getting ugly, we have to put on the monster hats.
Yeah. No, that.
And as you're talking, I'm thinking about our students. I'm thinking about the people that we work with, and I'm thinking about we probably need to be thinking about more of these types of external structures for the people that are judgers in at least the Myers-Briggs personality type system, because I think that really is something that you can rely upon when you feel like you don't know where your emotions are headed and you feel a little bit lost. You have something to anchor you back, and I think this is a fantastic system, and all of this is great. So just in general terms, yeah, this is awesome. I think it's great. I think it would definitely work. I think it would work for us too, and I think it will be even more impactful. Somebody like that is a judger that is your personality type. I think it's really powerful for that.
Well, then tell us what a perceiver then would do when you're in the heat of it. If it's not a specific thing, what do you do to unhook?
Well, we were actually talking about it beforehand. One of the most powerful things that we've done to not escalate fights. And we were also saying it's really interesting right now that we're talking about during fights, because we've been together for about 5 years, and I think we've fought more the last year.
Last 2 weeks. More than we probably, I mean, not like knock out, drag out, but like the last 2 weeks have been pretty intense, weirdly enough.
Yeah, well,
like leading up to this, I think.
And in part because we're both going through some pretty strong personal development stuff. And so one of the things we've recognized is that when we're actually tackling something specific and we're really focused on developing a portion of our individual personality, our behaviors get worse before they get better.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like that's the whole like this concept, this platitude of like give people space to grow. What it really means is give people an opportunity to get worse before they get better, and to work out a bunch of their shit while they're working through their shit. So it's a matter of, for us, it's a matter of kind of like going, okay, so I'm watching you go through this dance, and it's a different dance than I'm used to, because our dynamic was built on you behaving this way and me behaving this way, and now that you're shifting and now that you're growing and changing as a person, you're showing up different than I'm used to. And so I'm going to have some resistance to that, and you're going to be getting a lot of, all that dross is sort of like bubbling up to the surface, and it looks icky and it feels personal. And really what it is you're just going through something right now, and I need to recognize that. And we've both done that for each other through this last year. We've gone through a lot of, and we can see, because every once in a while we'll just look at each other, and I'm a total geek, right? I've been playing tabletop RPG games for as long as I can remember, and also like, you probably don't even know what RPG stands for, but these role-playing games. So so I'll just look at Joel and I'm like, I think I just leveled up. Like I think I just got enough experience to level up to the next place, and we'll both do that with each other. But before that, it's been really, it'll be really anxiety-producing.
Concept, Antonia, but I don't know if you've ever seen the program Arrow, or anytime some muscle builder, they have those bars. I've seen this also on like those obstacle course contests.
Right.
It starts at the bottom, and they have to jump up with the up level and jump up with the up level, right?
Right.
And so we have that concept as well, and we're always talking about lowering our threshold for crappiness.
Yeah. No, we talk about the thermostat.
It's been really messy, and then we're like, in that pattern and that pattern, and when we don't unhook, the cost that we pay. And now if there's something that we were on the plane actually coming home from our last trip, and Raj was like, that tone that you just used, we're kind of coming home after 3 weeks. I'd really like to have this loving, fun reentry, and that wasn't it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Nasty and snippy, and I didn't even realize it because it almost sounded neutral to me, but it was just starting to shift over,
Yeah, totally.
Literally.
So, I think. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. Is it okay if I complete?
Yeah, complete your thought.
So actually, that's actually our the one thing that we do is when we're in a time period where we're working on our stuff and things are escalating quickly. The one thing that we've really learned to do in a conversation, and the thing that escalates faster than anything else, is when somebody says something and you disagree with it, so you immediately jump in to try to correct them, and then they defend their position, or you just said something they don't agree with, and so they jump in to try to talk over you. It's that talk over thing. So what we've done is we have two strategies we've implemented. The first one is we wait till the person gets to complete the thought. So we'll just check in. If there's a pause and we think the person's done, we'll just go, do you feel like you got to complete your thought? And so that keeps it from getting to a place.
Did I get it? Is there more? Did I get it? Is there more?
Right. And if we feel like we have something we want to say, like something triggered us, and we don't feel like it was accurate or wasn't our truth, instead of jumping in, what we do is we just bookmark it. It's an anchor. And so what I'll do personally is I'll attach the word, like if he's like, you really have been, let's pretend he's like, you've been weaponizing my personal development, which sometimes happens, right? Like I know he's working on something, and I'll say something nasty about it, and so I just turn it into a weapon. And I'll disagree with his assertion, so I'll just think,
write that word down, honey. Weaponizing my personal development. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
just want to step over that. That's worth like underscoring.
Yeah, well, and it happens, right? And I'm not proud of it, but I'll do it because you get to a certain place and you're just nasty, right? And so I'll cross my fingers, and attached to the cross of the fingers, the bookmark is the word weapon. And now I don't have to think about what I want to say as a counterpoint. Now I've just tagged it, anchored it, and I put it down, and then I can actually focus on what he's saying. I don't have to be constructing my counterpoint. I don't have to be focused on what I want to say now. I can just fully be present with him if I've got that anchored. And if the person's going on for a long time and it feels like they're not finishing, right, like they've got a lot to say before they complete, we'll just lift our finger like this and let them know I've got something I'd like to say too. And
sometimes you'll have like this going.
Right, like crossing,
and then you're crossing arms and feet,
right. Yeah, and like there's a bunch of all this like stuff, but that allows the other person to complete their thought, and you stay present with them, and you're not just thinking about
humor and physicality, the somatics of it, so you're not all in your mind and the emotions.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I didn't mean to.
The idea of the personal growth thing, the weaponizing personal. So obviously we're committed to personal growth, and part of our wedding vows were like, hey, we're gonna be each other's back. We're gonna have each other's back in the midst of this. So we know that about each other, but when you're in the midst of growing in a certain way, that creates a lot of vulnerability and like insecurity, because I'm not good at this thing I'm trying to grow in, and there's a lot of clumsiness, I think, when you're going through that. So I have like a lot of like in the midst of growing in some way, I'm working towards something, becoming a better version of myself. Now I've got all insecurity. Well, I'm not there yet. I'm not here yet. I haven't done this yet. And she might say something she didn't even mean it to be triggering, but because I get so much insecurity, I've got heightened alert around this. And that can trigger.
Danger, Will Robinson, right?
Exactly. And I'll be like, hey, don't weaponize that. And she'll be like, I was talking about this thing. And then it was like, okay, then I was obviously triggered being very insecure and vulnerable about the thing I'm trying to work on. Mm. And that's on me to say, like, stop getting triggered about this, Joel. This is ridiculous. Like, this is something you're working on, and you are going to show up clumsy. And now I'm kind of like, hey, if I acted this way, this is something I'm working on. I wasn't indulging myself. I literally was working on this, I promise. And I'm not going to get triggered on this. I'm not going to let myself feel like I have to defend anything, because this is something I'm going to go ahead and give myself a pass, and I'm going to rest into myself, and I won't get triggered by what you say. Basically, is how I've approached that, is in a personal development frame.
That's great. I love the little like verbalization of what's going on in your head. Like, come on, Joel, right? And we're all doing that, right? We have this inner dialogue going on. Gabby whispered something to me as you were sharing.
Oh, before you do that, though, I just want to ask a question. What was the wedding vow that you said? Because we really like vows, and we're actually going to do a vow contest at some point. So, what was the vow about having each other's backs around personal development?
We each wrote our own vows to each other, and so they were both a little bit different, but both of them were around the idea that, like, the relationship is not the end. Like, this is not why we're living on this world, right? Mm-hmm. Both of us are excited to do something really big in the world, and we both have to be running on the same like jogging track. And I looked over and I see this beautiful woman who's doing the same thing. I'm like, hey. Why don't we jog next to each other on this journey of life? So
I love that.
We're committed to that, and it's like, because we're like, personal development and life partners and jogging towards something bigger for both of us, that means we are on the same team, and we're going to look to see where each other is having struggles and difficulties, and where we could support each other in that. So it's a big commitment for both of us to, like, hey, that's not cool, you're doing that. I don't think that's adding to your personal growth. Or have you thought about doing it this way? And we'll do that to each other in conversation, after fights, during fights, things of that nature. Right. So
you have a context of team. We mentioned context before. Raj and I will actually say, "Go team, Sundra!" And then just wanted to share with you our wedding vow of the month for July is actually, I promise to always grow with you and to do the work to intentionally create the life we want to live. So it's fitting that July is perfect for this topic. Okay, you were going to talk about turning up the volume.
I was, but I changed my mind because
okay.
I would like to really leverage like your guys' brilliance and take a couple of minutes to see if you can articulate, because like we throw out these terms, judger, perceiver, and I don't know that anyone knows what we're talking about. I often don't know what the heck those types are, and I was wondering if you could give a quick little summary that would illuminate things so that people are different. You know, when you said, oh, that tool's great for whatever, what are we?
Judgers.
Let's see.
Well, it's the concept of differentiation.
Well,
yeah,
so,
but that we're different.
Yeah, so we're different, and not everything works for the same people, and even you're different in your partnership. And I think in your relationship work that you do with this profiling, that's one of the things you're trying to highlight, right? That we're different, and if you can know each other's differences, then you can be way more effective in having a great relationship. So I think it'd take, maybe 5 minutes to speak about that topic, and then we want to open it up to Hangout, and obviously we'll keep sharing, but we'll allow people to come in. So could you talk about that a bit?
Sure. You want me to take it?
Yeah, you want to take this one. That's great.
So really, what I love about Myers-Briggs is that what most people know about it, which is the 4-letter code. So, some people are, I'm an ENTP, he's an ENFP. There's this 4-letter code that is an overview of a personality type, and there's 16 different types in the Myers-Briggs system. But what's really great about it is that that 4-letter code is actually a secret decoder ring for the way your brain is wired. Underneath that 4-letter code are what are called cognitive functions, and those are mental processes that all of us are utilizing all the time. There's 8 primary cognitive functions, and 4 of them are called perceiving, which basically means information gathering, or kind of how we see the world and take it in and understand it and learn. And 4 of them are decision making, or what's called judging processes, or evaluative. And depending upon your personality type construction, you're going to have one primary way of perceiving the world and one primary way of making decisions. And that is going to inform basically it's a filtration for everything that you choose to look at. Even it's the whole classic case of the elephant and the blind men, where one's looking at or feeling the trunk and the other one's feeling the tail, and they're both describing it in relatively similar terms, but then they get to a discrepancy and they go, what are you talking about, right? Like, what do you mean it's like got 2 holes at the end, or what do you mean it's got like a fluffy little part at the end of it? What are you talking about? And it's because we are so saturated in how we're wired that we don't even recognize that other people are wired to look at different things, much less evaluate them differently. And so if we come to the situation believing that the other person is wired exactly like we are, and they're looking at the same thing we're looking at and making the same decisions, or evaluating it the same way we are, when they miss something that's really obvious to us, we either think that they're being deliberately obnoxious or stupid, right? Like, how could you possibly miss this, right? How could you possibly say that there's a little puffy part at the end of this long piece? Like, that's ridiculous. So I don't even actually think that a person has to know typology, like in its intricacies. All they have to know, Raj, you're basically at a point where in a relationship, what you know about typology serves you the best, which is, I know we're wired differently. That's all you have to know. All you have to know is that people come to the plate looking at different things. So if somebody misses something that's super obvious to you, or if they come up to a conclusion that is not the same conclusion you would have come to, instead of demonizing that, you just step back and take a moment to go, I wonder if they're wired to see something different than I am. And the whole concept of wiring also comes down to this concept of the cost of specialization, which is, if we're completely focused on this thing over here, by definition, everything over here is either in a peripheral or we just don't see it at all. It's in a blind spot. So if we recognize that we're all wired to look at something, right, or a set of something, and we're all wired to use different criteria to evaluate what we're looking at, then when somebody comes with a different conclusion, we don't go, you're seeing what I'm seeing, but you're just being stupid or obnoxious. We go, actually, you might not even be looking at the same thing at all. You might be looking at something over there that is something I can't see. So every time I come to a conclusion, you're looking at me like I'm being deliberately obnoxious or stupid. So So that's really where typology helps people the most, is just going, oh my God, we're wired different. Like literally, like the neural connections we're making, the neural pathways that we are creating in our minds are totally different. And so if you take it to the next level, then it's like, okay, well, how am I wired? And then the next level is, how is my mate wired? And then the next level is, how are these different styles of wiring triggering each other? And what are, you know, how are we complementing each other? How are we triggering each other? Like, and so that's further down the rabbit's hole. But the most important thing to know is we all have different cognitive functions, and we're all wired just a little differently.
So as an example, let me just try to give a quick example. So Antonia mentioned that she's an ENTP. So, and I don't want to get into too much technical detail, but we'll go ahead and just give it a little bit enough so you can understand what we're talking about. She basically makes decisions with a mental process that we've nicknamed accuracy. So she's looking for pieces of information, for data that makes sense to her logically. And because I'm an ENFP, I make my decisions based on a mental process we've nicknamed authenticity. I'm making my decisions based on what's in alignment with me, my core values, how I feel or resonate with something. So we'll be in an argument, we'll be talking, and because her mind is connecting what makes sense for her, she oftentimes can dominate the verbal end of an argument because her mind is firing quickly, and I have to like process through how I'm feeling about something, how it internally impacts me. And so in the midst of an argument, she's just rapid fire,
laughter recognition over here.
and I'm like, wow, I feel so outgunned here. And then we get into a space where she's emotionally upset, and I'm like, you know, like another argument maybe, and she's processing things, and I say, well, how are you feeling about this? She's like, I guess bad. I'm like, well, what bad? That doesn't mean anything to me. What do you mean by bad? She's like, I don't know any more than that, just bad. And we'll basically dig into how she's feeling, and I'll help facilitate that. So we're coming at our decisions in such different ways, and because we know that about each other, we really do slow the process down and hold space in the midst of conflict, which I think is really helpful, because I know that when she's feeling strong emotion, that's not how she makes decisions in her best self. So slowing everything down, allowing that to play out over time is helpful. And then when we're in an argument, I'm like, okay, I get what you just said, but and it's not that I'm stupid. You know, I feel like I'm a very intelligent guy, but her thoughts are firing so fast. Things make sense to her. She's clean slicing information so quickly. I'm like, well, this thing's like this. She's like, no, you're globbing those two things together. Let's clean slice this. So she'll slow down that process for me.
Yeah.
And it really works great if we can understand about each other and slow things down and have those conversations to start parsing out the emotions, the thoughts, and dig into what's actually going on.
Yeah. Well, just if it's okay, I just want to give just like a little example of how this can play out in our relationship.
Sure.
Well, I'm a thinker, and I use the thinking process as my way of showing up and evaluating things. So when I get emotional, I am Hulk smash, right? Like I am not.
She's not kidding.
My emotional intelligence is something.
We do that. Hulk smash. Okay.
Right. My emotional intelligence is not as high as his is. And so if I get in an emotional space, that means I'm done. Like I actually have to physically change context. Well, early on in our relationship, Joel thought that was me. We call it hanging up the phone, which is I'm ending the conversation and you don't get to say anything anymore. And so he kept saying, like, you're hanging up the phone on me, right? Like, in a conversation, I would just, like, physically walk away, and he'd be like, wait, we still have more to talk about. And I would be so, like, I just couldn't articulate anything because I was so overwhelmed with an usually unidentified emotion at that moment. I just didn't even know I was feeling.
Doesn't care, or this or that, or how dare you walk away from me, or whatever, all the stories.
Right, and I had to physically change context in order to get away from whatever was triggering that strong emotion to get back into my good space, which was I get back to a place where I can manage information and data. And so now he knows that. So if I walk away, I sometimes I can't even say I need a minute. I'm so overwhelmed I can't even articulate that. So now he knows when I physically walk away, I'll actually be back in about 5 to 10 minutes. That's all it takes. But he had to learn that over time because I'm wired when I get emotional, like that's not my best self. Whereas if he gets emotional, that is actually that's his sandbox. Like he plays very well there. So we've had to learn, like if I get that emotional space, he was thinking, well, it's in his sandbox, so now we're doing good. Right now we're getting to the real raw meat of it. And I'm like, I just turn into a blubbering idiot. So now we've held space for each other's strategies to get back to our best self. And if I go to a really data-oriented space, he's not thinking I'm becoming a robot. He's understanding that I'm actually trying to bring my best self to the conversation. And he'll give me space to not be emotional, even though emotional is his sandbox. So we try to we try to visit each other's sandboxes when we can, but also recognize that if we play in that space too long, we're actually going to bring each other out of our strengths, right? Like we're in, well, this is my sandbox, so I'm doing great here, but he's out of his strength, so he's not going to be able to show up as his best self. So that's really where understanding this wiring is very helpful.
Right. Yeah. You know, speaking of being very helpful, you know, we want to engage with the audience here. So Raj is about to make the Hangout live. But we also like to emphasize action here. We say, you know, a little bit of intention, attention, and action goes a long way. And at the end of every one of our blogs, and pretty much every piece that we do, there's always something called the action option. So applying the idea of the action option, is there, you know, an assessment or a place that you would point people to, either on your website or another place, to understand more about themselves and their partner, perhaps? Maybe they can both do the assessment, and where they can learn how that might show up in their own relationship?
Yeah, we have, so one of the best places to start if you come over to personalityhacker.com is we have a personality test you can take. It'll give you results. It'll offer you to get, you know, premium content around those results, but it gives you a lot of great resource just by taking the test, and we've got a lot of free articles on the site as well. I would actually recommend one of the best places to start is to begin listening to our podcast. You can find it on iTunes or the Android platform. It's been very popular. It's basically a format where we sit down for about 40 minutes and we tackle topics and we dig deep into them. We don't just kind of surface, like, you know, platitude type statements. We really try to dig in and have conversation. And people have really resonated with that. There's a lot of episodes on relationships that people can go back in the archives and listen to.
Great. And maybe in the comments down here you can also put a link to that podcast or the name and make it visible and easy for people to find. Absolutely.
But if you go to the personalityhacker.com website, you can find a lot of those resources.
I see that, yeah. Raj put that in the comments right there. Great.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll continue talking here, but if you refresh the webpage that you're on watching the show so far, the Join the Hangout button is now live, so you can show up in the Hangout itself, and in there you can chat comments in the chat window. And if you'd like to ask a question, we'll be happy to answer your questions, and you can interact with Joel and Antonia or Gabby and myself live.
So refresh your browser there so that button goes live for you, and then join the Hangout and get your questions asked, again, either in the comments or in video.
And if you have any problems with the button, just chat it in the comment window underneath the in the web page here underneath the video feed.
So yeah. I was going to say, while we're waiting for people to come online, I just wanted to offer one of the other tips we had mentioned earlier. And Joel, you were talking about, you know, when you're noticing a process that's happening. Raj and I, we have a practice we call turning up the volume.
This one's awesome.
It's a few different ways of expressing that. But when we notice, because, you know, you guys know that most of our upsets are really based on from when we were children and the dynamics that got created there, and we're really trying to resolve those now. And so if you really look and say, well, what is the 4-year-old, the 7-year-old in that range? What are they really saying? Be that child, you know? Like, is it, I want it my way, my way, my way, you know?
Always determined.
You know, I surprised Raj once where I literally, I went into his office and I slid on the floor and I started kicking and screaming, and I said, I want it my way, my way, my way. And we just both started laughing, and I got my way, so it actually worked. Yeah. But I was being humorous, not a pain in the ass. Yeah, just to again bring that play, but to turn the volume up of like, oh, I notice I'm doing this, and then often we try to be adult about it. Like, when I do this, and sometimes it can help to one, acknowledge that it's something from the past and it's not from right now what's going on between the two of you.
Yeah, it really underlines that it's young behavior. You know, we think that we're adults in adult bodies. We're actually, like, all of a sudden regress to like a 5-year-old in an adult body, but we're still pretending to be an adult. And one of the awesome things about the turn up the volume tip is it actually fits into the stop, shift, start strategy. It's a way to stop. You know, it's a way to get unhooked, to interrupt the pattern that's going on.
Yeah, that pattern interrupt we spoke about earlier.
And it gives you an opportunity to see how self-expressed you can be, too. Gabby's way better at this than I.
And then one last thing that's really, really important and is about embracing the olive branch. No matter how small it is, you know, that's the whole idea in Stop, Shift, Start, is if somebody is willing to put themselves out there, and, you know, even if it's not an apology at all, or even if it's, you know, the half-assed apology, whatever it is, maybe it's just a look, maybe it's a joke, take it. meet them there. It's not just an olive branch. That is the rope out of the quicksand that your relationship is in, and you want to grab it with all your might. So it takes courage to offer the olive branch, so offer them, but please do. And when someone does offer it, have the courage to receive it as well, because it makes all the difference in the world in your relationship. Because again, it's not those big things, it's how we treat each other in those micro moments that really are going to make up your relationship.
You know, I have this vision of you guys like being on Oprah someday talking about this stuff. You've got so many frameworks, so many great ideas. I mean, this stuff is really good stuff, and I'm really excited to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes as you're talking, and I'm like your guest, right? So.
Well, we do.
Back and forth. Yeah, we were talking. Took a little reset shower before, and we had a little Sundra Summit in the shower before the show. And I was like,
we call it the Sundra Conference Center sometimes.
Yeah, we learned so much from our guests, like on our show last week with Alex Allman. On the
watch that episode, gentlemen.
How to keep sex dirty as it starts. Right? Yeah, as it starts. And
the seduction part.
The seduction part. And, you know, Alex is just a master. You can check him out at revolutionarysex.com. Gabby,
I'll put that in there.
And he said some critical things, and, like, it up-leveled our sex life from, like, one orbit to another, just, like, with 4 or 5 things that he said. And I was just commenting on how the show is so great because we learn awesome things from our guests, and our guests learns awesome things from us, and we just
then all the audience gets the best of both worlds with all these great ideas.
Yeah, and there's so many awesome people in our circle that just have such phenomenal information that it's just like this treasure trove of like tips and tools. Along those lines, like, what would you say is like?
Oh, just before that question, we have all these alliterations for all of these tips, and again, they get categorized into fights, clean, sex, dirty, and before, as it starts, during, and after, because we really do want them to be bite-sized, memorable, fun, and so we actually have a cheat sheet of I think it's 8 tips on how to keep the fights clean and 8 on how to keep the sex dirty. It's almost like a bookmark if you print it out, and that's on our website. Once you, if you opt in there, you can see right on the screen there. It's the Quick Start Kit, and that'll give you some of our top tips there. And of course, if you want them in detail, you can find them on our ebook. But I like to have the little card in my wallet, so I'm like, oh gosh, get it out of the wallet. What do we need right now?
Yeah, if you are curious about that that cheat sheet, you can just opt in here on the sidebar element here and get that. It's pretty awesome. So I was just going to ask, well, first of all, let's see, we have welcome Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. And Aaron.
And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump right in. We'd love to hear your questions. But these little bite-sized usable tips are awesome. They're just such lifelines to having a great relationship. And as we like to say, if your relationship sucks, your life sucks. So why not have a great relationship? So I was wondering, like, not in your relationship sucks, but I often say if you say your relationship is fine, then it's pretty effed up or it's on its way there. So it's not just a way for it to suck. If you say, it's fine, I'm like, ooh, that's bad news. So I was just wondering if there were like 1 or 2 little tidbit tips. We have the great broad brushstroke of like, we're different, and don't assume that your partner sees the world the same as you, nor responds to it the same as you. Is there like 1 or 2 tidbits from your treasure trove that you'd like to share? I'm fascinated. I want to hear them.
Something that Joel does that I think is brilliant and will sort of snap me back to reality faster than anything is we really love the phrase, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy?
Yes.
And I think that in a relationship, especially in conflict, is possibly one of the most like sobering thoughts, because in that moment of argument and conflict, really what you want to be safe, you want to be understood, you want to have the other person feel compassion for you, but in that moment, it just feels like you want to be right. Like the actual thing you want, your strategy is almost invariably not serving it. Like your strategy is not getting to you what you really ultimately want. Not working. Yeah, and so Joel will just stop in the middle of an argument and he'll just go, in this argument, would we rather be right or would we rather be happy? And it's such a sobering line, and
the context, that anchor.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know how he's done the wax on, wax off work of getting to a point in the middle of an argument of being able to stop and say that. But whatever he's done to do that, that's been incredibly important for us. So just that line, just like exercising the ability to say that line in the middle of an argument has been really impactful for me.
Beautiful.
I think that word exercise is important. And the other thing too, that when we're thinking about like fighting, or like I don't think we should fear conflict. I think conflict builds intimacy ultimately, right? Yes. Conflict is what we want because that's how we express where needs aren't getting unmet and all this stuff.
Yeah, the problem is the problem, right? And the mess is your message, and yeah.
One thing that I've realized is we're not only in a relationship, like it's not just me, it's not just Antonia. There's also a third entity, which is the relationship itself. Yes. And that we're a part of. And also, I have 3 children, 2 from a previous marriage, 9 and 7-year-old boys, and then we've got a baby together who's 3 years old. And so we have a blended family, and they're watching everything we do. They're watching how we interact. And in my mind, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, how we behave is setting an example for them, and it's basically it's in a sense creating the reality of the relationships they're going to have in their lives.
Absolutely.
So that's always on my radar, is to say, like the other day, we were in a really intense conversation, and our 3-year-old was trying to get our attention, because as soon as you get in a conversation that's heated, the kids instantly need you to pay attention to them, right? Because it's unnerving to have mom and dad, like, in a fight or anything like this. So she's trying to get our attention, and we both stopped for a moment, took a breath, looked at Piper, and said, "Piper, Daddy loves you." And Mommy turned and said, "Piper, Mommy loves you." And we confirmed love for each other in front of her. We said, "Daddy loves Mommy." And Mommy would say, "Mommy loves Daddy. We're just in the middle of a disagreement. We're working through something right now, and we're doing it in front of you." And I think it's healthy for her to see that positive conflict resolution. And I think, so thinking about it in terms of, it's not just about me. I mean, it's not just about her. It's not just about our relationship, but it's also about all the other pieces of people watching and the examples we're setting. Yeah. So that's something I bring, like, in my mind, that's on my radar a lot in the midst of this.
We often say wonderful is worth it. It really takes something to unhook, and it really takes something to be a good example for your kids, and it really takes something to nurture your relationship rather than just drift into this default. But wonderful is really worth it. Whatever it takes, and in my opinion, overall, it's actually much easier than all the drama and the upset. I mean, fighting is exhausting, and it just lowers your self-esteem. Even if you get in a zinger, you might be like, "Oh, that doesn't feel too good." Afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing is a lot of. I mean, we've just heard so many amazing tips from other people. One tip was the concept of the emotional stack, which is if you're blowing your top right now, it may actually be about the thing you're blowing your stack about, but it might not be just that. Like it's that you allowed that behavior to continue, and the first time it happened, you were just like, "Oh, I can handle that. That's not that big of a deal." So you allow it to happen again, and you're like, "I totally can make space for that. That's no problem." And some part of you thinks that you're washing it clean. But you're not. You're just allowing it to continue to stack until finally you've reached your threshold, and at that moment, it's not okay anymore. But the person has been doing that behavior for a long time, and it triggered you, but you just went, "Oh, I'm not the kind of person that gets upset by that," or whatever your rationalization was. And then all of a sudden, it's not okay anymore. And so being really conscientious of stacks, and I try to anything that I apply to the relationship, I try to use the world in general as my sort of my boot camp. Anything I want to implement in our relationship, I try to exercise at all other times. So if somebody does something to annoy me, one of the things I try to do is I try to acknowledge that I'm annoyed. That doesn't mean I have to confront them at the moment, but I have to at least be honest with myself that was not okay. And so in our relationship, I tried to bring all those things that I do, sort of that Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off, which is you gotta, I'm doing this motion, and I don't understand how this has anything to do with karate until suddenly now this is my karate move. And so when I bring it into the relationship, what I try to do is anytime he triggers me, I don't want to see myself as a wife that gets triggered by that. But I am getting triggered by that, so I have to acknowledge that that's the reality of it. Like you said, hype up the reality, or what was your alliteration?
Turn up the volume.
Turn up the volume.
Well,
okay.
Looking at that gap between where you really can see yourself and want to be and where you currently are in the moment.
Right.
You're mostly over there in the usual world, but
right.
under-resourced or hungry, as I mentioned before there. And there's that gap. But the upset is the shining the flashlight on what's needed to heal that so that you're not having that repeatedly in the future.
Right. So when I'm triggered by him and I don't want to see myself as the kind of person who's triggered, like you're basically insinuating the best way to get to become a person who's not triggered by it is to acknowledge it right now.
Right.
And that's modesty, right? That's acknowledging our limitations and being honest with where we're actually at. So
we named them at that point. I heard you mention your personality type as well. And I think it was about the data. What was that person? The analyzer?
Oh, accuracy.
Accuracy, yes.
Right.
So naming those characteristics or those patterns,
Right.
One called "My name's Gabby," right? I can talk. I can't get a word in edgewise,
That's we name our arguments.
That's a great idea. So basically what I go is like, hey, I feel stupid about getting triggered by this, but I am triggered by it, so I have some self-consciousness around it, but I just want to let you know. And even just saying it, right? Like, I mean, I feel kind of stupid about getting triggered, and Joel will do the same thing. Like, I feel like an idiot for getting triggered by this, but I am triggered by it, so I'm just going to say it. And sometimes you don't even have to do anything. All that just acknowledges it as opposed to putting it on a shelf and allowing the stack to happen. And so that blow up just never happens because we just acknowledge, hey, I was triggered there, so I don't know what we're going to do with that information, but that's what it is. And we find that a lot of fights just don't exist. I guess that's the black swan, right? Like, it just never happens because we've tried to catch it early.
Well, and we don't want to give a sterile.
Also, though, Antonia, is you catching yourself rather than your partner saying, "Oh, that's that's like that," and you're kind of doing your own do-over, we call it. Often, a few weeks ago, Raj and I were cooking, and I said something kind of nasty, and I stopped and
I was thinking to myself, like, did she really say that? That sucks.
And so I caught myself, and I said, using the old LL Cool J song, changing the words a bit, I was like, "I'm gonna call me out." Call me out. And it was just like,
nice.
Okay, that wasn't cool what I just said.
It immediately disarmed the whole thing. Yeah, Joel, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just the other. I know we're running out of time. The kind of the last thing that I've been observing is time seems to be a key factor in all of this. When you're and we're talking about in the midst of an argument, in the midst of disagreement, if you have a child that needs to be attended to, like she's screaming, she needs attention for something, or you've got an appointment to go to, or a business meeting, or some call to jump on, or you got to get to the gym by a certain time, or whatever it is, it heightens the intensity of the disagreement in the moment. And I've noticed that the more time you can give disagreements to get down, because you're moving with emotions in the midst of a disagreement, you could do a lot of damage because you know each other's vulnerabilities, you know what each other is triggered by, and you're trying to go fast to get to the next thing. Sometimes saying, look, I'm really upset right now, we need to fight about this, quote unquote, but I got to go to this meeting. We don't have time, and I don't want to go half-assed at it. I don't want to like just kind of resolve this. I want to actually dig into this. And so giving the time it needs, and sometimes that could be up to 5, 6, 8 hours maybe of a conversation, and not all the time, depending on the conversation, but that time piece is so important to slow everything down. And when I find myself getting triggered and getting more intense, I take a deep breath. Like, whoa, let's slow this down for a second. Why am I getting so triggered right now? And I think that's really helpful in the midst of a disagreement, is to slow things down, like mechanically, if you can.
Like go to bullet time. Major bullet time.
Give it time.
Yeah.
And again, I was saying be preventative as well. We do a 3-hour once a month reset. So slow it down, invest the time when you need it, and then be proactive about the time you spend on, hey, is there anything that just kind of in the last month is still there for you? And so you're not in the middle of the next argument, someone whips out some new thing that's been bothering them for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We just have a couple minutes left here, and we've had so much great things to share. I just wanted to see if one of our guests had a question or comment. I think maybe Erin or Sarah had something to share.
So, Joel and Antonia, I am currently in a relationship, and my boyfriend and I tend to fight and bicker a lot about like the most random things, but I just want to know how you figured out what your triggers were and how long it took you to figure those out, because I have no idea why we bicker so much, but they're over the most ridiculous little things.
Great question.
Yeah, because back to knowing yourself and your partner.
It's usually about something else. Like whatever for me, often it's something that I'm not wanting to admit out loud because it'll be embarrassing. Maybe I've got an insecurity about something, and oftentimes I'll attach that to something external. And like right before we got on this you know, we're like frantically trying to set up the you know, the cameras and get everything down, and I'm like, I didn't have enough time for this. Why did we start this process earlier? And I'm really frustrated. And Tim's like, it's gonna be fine. Everything's gonna be okay. And I'm like, yeah, but they're relying on us to make sure everything's working. And it was a smuggle for me because we're coming on live and we want to show up. And here I'm nervous about presenting well and being present and being articulate. And I'm channeling it all into the structure of setting up the computer, right? So it looks like it's something about the computer, the thing, but it's actually, it's my insecurity that's coming out, and I can't just say, hey, I'm really feeling insecure right now because I feel silly and embarrassed to say that. Like I'm supposed to show up as, you know, really in command and charge all the time and have all the answers. You know, it's a manly thing to do. But I was insecure, so I projected onto the situation of the computer and setting up the microphone and camera. So that's something that is one thing. You might have some things to say about this too.
I think it took us a while to figure. I mean, it definitely took a while to figure out. Like when I leave the conversation for a moment, number one, it took Joel a while to figure out that I wasn't leaving permanently, that I was always going to come back within a small amount of time. It took me a while to be able to articulate why I was leaving. It took us a while to work just that piece out, and I think we did a lot of post-processing. Like we talk about our fights. We talk about how we fight and why we fight. Like we do a lot of post-processing on our fights, and so I think we make fighting a topic of interest for us. And I think that's how we figured things out faster, but it definitely took some time. It was like, okay, so remember when we were fighting like a couple days ago and you said that thing, and like I have no idea why you said that, and then the person will go, I don't know why I said that either. So I think it's being interested in the topic of bickering and being interested in the topic of fighting. Like, why are you doing that? And one of the things I heard from a marketer was that, you know, if you put somebody's personal name on a newspaper, that article or that newspaper article will be the most fascinating thing that they've ever read. And that's, I mean, our relationship is one of the most fascinating things in the world to us because it's our everyday experience. Like it's us as people. So we're just fascinated. We give ourselves permission to be fascinated by ourselves, and we give ourselves permission to be fascinated by our relationship and by our arguments and why we're fighting. And so we do a lot of like just asking questions, exploring that space of why we're fighting and what we're fighting about. And I think that that's definitely accelerated the process. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's. I mean, even if it is self-indulgent, I don't care because it makes our lives better.
Well, the other thing that comes up too in this is like if I recognize that, like I just said, it was the nervousness of coming on here. If I say that, now I don't get to use the external thing anymore, and I don't want to let go of that because it was a tool I had, and I resist that so much. And I'll even say, like, I'm going to tell you this, and I really don't want to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this because I value our relationship more than me being right or me being able to have this tool. And then it diffuses me being able to use that, and I feel even less empowered. Like I feel empowered, but sometimes I feel like more vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because I've given away that tool. But I think ultimately that kind of thing helps us get to a resolution faster. So, Aaron, if you're willing to start, if you can, identifying what's triggering you, because you're probably not going to know about your boyfriend yet. But if you can start with yourself and really. You may have the real answer, you may not be ready to admit it yet, but you probably have an idea of what the emotional thing's going on for you underneath the surface, and that's really the key of what you want to focus on, I think. And the more you can bring that real issue out, it offers the ability for the resolution, because then you're talking about the thing that's the problem, not this other thing that you've latched it onto.
Just a book recommendation really quick for helping with this. There is an entire school of thought called Radical Honesty. I recommend the book Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton. And in his 3 stages of honesty, the third one is basically being honest with how childish you are or all your ego fixations and strategies. So I recommend reading the book Radical Honesty to just kind of go, oh yeah, I guess I am kind of doing that. And pick up, it's basically kind of a way of life. It's like an exercise, not just a concept. It's like an actual like lifestyle. So that is that's been helpful for me anyway.
And Aaron, I'd recommend also remember the personalityhacker.com website and the assessment there. You can take it, your boyfriend can take it, you can sit down together and look at, oh, this is what I learned about myself, oh, I see how that shows up and how we interact when we do this. And just kind of start to do a little, you know, the mapping of the dynamics between the two of you. I'm sure you've had, you know, there's some patterns, so you start to look, how is this familiar? And even better, how is this familiar from before when I was dating him?
Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Thank you. That was so helpful.
Yeah, great, Aaron. Great question, and thanks for being vulnerable and sharing on the show today. We are a little bit over time, so we're going to wrap today. And we just want to let you know that you can share with your friends. They can watch the replay of this show on our website, relationshipfunandgames.com. Go to Fights Clean, Sex Dirty TV, and check out the episode library. And next week, we're going to have an awesome show with How to Keep the Sex Dirty with Susan Bratton.
Back to that spicy side, where we want to keep it spicy, not so spicy on the fighting.
Yeah, this is going to be super spicy. Susan Bratton is an expert in how do you maximize sexual pleasure, sexual technique in your relationship. So
yeah, she sent us this set of DVDs that we watched called Steamy Sex Ed that she produced. Someone else put them on, and her personality media, personal life media. Yes, with personal life media, they put those out, and boy, was that some sexy, steamy sex education. So yeah, looking forward to having her and her husband Tim on next week.
Yeah, that's going to be an awesome show. So please do join us, and
thanks again, Antonia and Joel. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much to have you today. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Seeing you soon.